Montana Territory, 1885. The railroads carved through the wild country like iron serpents, bringing change to a land that resisted it with every pine-covered mountain and sweeping prairie. Autumn had painted the landscape in gold and amber, and a chill wind blew across the platform of the newly constructed Silver Creek Station as the evening train belched steam into the twilight air. Adam Zeller removed his worn leather gloves and tucked them into his belt. At 26, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had spent his life in the saddle. His sun-bronzed face was clean-shaven for his trip to town, his dark hair slightly too long beneath his cream-colored Stetson. The journey from his small ranch had taken most of the day, but the supplies he needed couldn't wait. Adam believed that isolation was the only path to peace in these untamed lands. His father had taught him that much before a winter fever took both his parents 3 years prior. Trust no one but family, son. His father had wheezed through blue-tinged lips. Out here, a man stands alone or he falls. Adam had lived by those words, working his modest spread with minimal help, keeping to himself, avoiding entanglements. The West was no place for soft hearts. What Adam claimed he wanted was simple: to build his ranch into something substantial, to prove his worth through cattle and land. Yet on nights when the Montana winds howled through the cabin his father had built, a different truth whispered through the cracks, a yearning for something more than empty rooms and silent meals. The station was emptying as the last passengers departed and locals collected their mail and parcels. Adam nodded politely to the station master and turned to leave when a sound stopped him, soft but unmistakable against the dying rumble of the departing train. Someone weeping. He rounded the corner of the station building and saw her sitting on a wooden bench, a single valise at her feet. Her honey-blonde hair was partially hidden beneath a modest blue bonnet. Her matching travel dress wrinkled from what must have been a long journey. Even with her face in her hands, he could see she was young, perhaps 20 or 21, and entirely alone. Adam hesitated. Other people's troubles were exactly the kind of entanglements he avoided. He took a step back, intending to leave, when the young woman looked up and their eyes met. Hers were the color of summer skies, now reddened from tears, and something in them reached straight through his carefully constructed walls. "Miss," he said, removing his hat. "Are you waiting for someone?" She quickly wiped her cheeks with gloved hands. "No, sir. I'm afraid not." Her accent was Eastern, cultured. She didn't belong here, that much was clear. "The station's closing soon," he said awkwardly. "Is there someone in town expecting you? Family, perhaps." Fresh tears welled in her eyes. "I have no one, sir." Her voice trembled. "I thought. I had arrangements, but they've fallen through." Adam shifted uncomfortably, glancing around. The platform was now empty except for them and the station master, who was locking up the ticket window. Night was falling fast, and Silver Creek was no place for an unaccompanied woman after dark. He stepped closer, and she looked up at him with a vulnerability that made his chest tighten. "I have nowhere to go," she whispered. The admission hung between them in the cooling evening air. Against every instinct, against everything his father had taught him about survival in this harsh territory, Adam found himself speaking. "There's a respectable boarding house in town," he said, offering his hand. "At least for tonight. I can take you there." Her small, gloved hand trembled as it slipped into his, and in that moment, Adam Zeller's carefully ordered world began to shift on its axis. The young woman introduced herself as Theresa Sanders, 20 years old, from Boston. She said little as they walked the short distance to Mrs. Holloway's boarding house, a tidy 2-story building on Silver Creek's Main Street. "My father passed last winter," she explained as they reached the front porch. "He left considerable debts. When our house was sold, I had little choice but to accept what seemed a generous offer from my father's associate, Mr. Gordon." Adam's jaw tightened. What kind of offer? A position as governess to his children in Montana. He provided the train ticket and promised accommodations. She swallowed hard. "But when I arrived and sent word to the address he provided, the station master returned with my message undelivered. There is no Gordon Ranch. There never was." Adam's hands clenched into fists. Such schemes were not uncommon, luring desperate Eastern women west with false promises, abandoning them in frontier towns where their options quickly became limited to servitude or worse. "Mrs. Holloway is a good woman," he said, reaching for the door. She'll help you find proper work. Mrs. Holloway, a stout widow with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, took one look at Theresa's quality clothing and tear-stained face and understood the situation immediately. Another one, she said with a sigh. Third this year. These Eastern scoundrels ought to be horsewhipped. She patted Theresa's hand. Don't worry, dear. You're safe now. She looked expectantly at Adam, who reluctantly produced enough coins to cover a week's board. Very generous, Mrs. Holloway remarked with raised eyebrows. I didn't realize you were in the habit of rescuing damsels, Mr. Zeller. I'm not, he said firmly. Good evening, ladies. He put his hat back on and turned to leave, telling himself he'd done his duty. The girl was safe. That was the end of it. Mr. Zeller, Theresa called after him. When he turned, she had followed him to the doorway. Thank you. I don't know how I'll repay your kindness, but I will. No need, he said gruffly. Good luck to you, Miss Sanders. As he rode back to his ranch under a star-filled sky, Adam tried to put the golden-haired Eastern girl out of his mind. His father would have called him a fool for getting involved, for spending money he could hardly spare. Yet something about her dignity in distress, the way she had gathered her courage despite her circumstances, lingered in his thoughts. Just tired, he muttered to his horse. That's all. But 3 days later, when the spring wagon he used for supply runs pulled up in front of Holloway's boarding house, even Adam wasn't entirely convinced by his own justification that he happened to be in town anyway. Mrs. Holloway met him on the porch, arms folded across her ample bosom. She's been asking after work, the landlady said without preamble. Girl's educated, reads Latin and plays piano. Fat lot of good that does her here. Adam shifted uncomfortably. How is she? Brave. Scared. Too pretty for her own good in a town like this. Mrs. Holloway's eyes narrowed. Already had the saloon owner asking if she might consider serving drinks. Told him where he could put that offer. Does she have any prospects? Reverend's wife offered to let her teach the little ones, but it's only 2 days a week. Not enough to live on. She studied Adam's face. Why the interest, Mr. Zeller? You've spent years avoiding entanglements. Adam cleared his throat. My mother taught at a ladies' seminary back east before she married. Just reminds me of her is all. Mrs. Holloway's expression softened. Your week's payment runs out tomorrow. She's got no funds to speak of. Adam's thoughts turned to his ranch, the unfinished rooms in the house his father had started but never completed, the stack of mending that had piled up, the accounts that needed proper keeping. I might have a position, he said slowly. Temporary, mind you, until she finds something more suitable. Mrs. Holloway's eyebrows shot up. What kind of position? Housekeeper. The place needs a woman's touch. He hastened to add, separate quarters. Proper arrangement. I can bring her to town for church and social gatherings. Mighty big change in thinking for a man who barely speaks 2 words at town meetings, Mrs. Holloway observed. Adam had no good answer for that. When Theresa appeared in the parlor, she wore a simpler dress than before, her golden hair braided and pinned neatly. Her eyes still carried sadness, but there was determination there too. Mr. Zeller has a proposal, Mrs. Holloway announced. Theresa's eyes widened in alarm, and Adam quickly removed his hat. A business arrangement, he clarified, feeling heat rise in his face. My ranch needs a housekeeper. Room and board plus wages. Temporary, until you find more suitable employment. Hope and suspicion warred in her expression. Why would you help me? You don't know me. It was the question Adam had been asking himself for 3 days. My mother was from Boston, he said finally. Found herself out here with no family either. Someone helped her once. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was truth enough. What he didn't say was how her vulnerability awakened something protective in him that he'd thought long buried, or how her refined manner reminded him that there was more to life than mere survival. Theresa considered his offer carefully. I would need references. Assurance of your character. Mrs. Holloway will vouch for me, Adam said, as will Reverend Thomas and Dr. Miller. He's a good man, Mrs. Holloway confirmed. Keeps to himself, but honest as the day is long. Adam watched as Theresa weighed her options, which he knew were painfully few. Finally, she nodded. I accept your offer, Mr. Zeller. On a trial basis. The 15-mile journey to Adam's ranch took most of the day. They traveled in awkward silence at first, Theresa perched beside him on the wagon seat, her valise and a few supplies Mrs. Holloway had insisted she take secured in the back. As the town disappeared behind them, and the vast landscape opened up, Theresa gasped at the snow-capped mountains in the distance and the rolling grasslands dotted with wildflowers. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "So different from Boston." Adam found himself pointing out landmarks. The creek that ran through his property, the distant mountains where he hunted elk in the fall, the stands of aspen that turned golden in autumn. Theresa listened attentively, asking intelligent questions about the land and the seasons. "How large is your ranch?" she asked. 600 acres. Small by Montana standards, but it's good land. Water year-round, sheltered valley for winter grazing. And you manage it alone? Hire hands for roundup and branding. Rest of the time, it's just me." He paused. "And you now, I suppose." As they crested a gentle hill in the late afternoon, Adam's ranch came into view below them. The main house was modest but solid, built of squared logs with a covered porch. A large barn, corrals, and several outbuildings completed the scene. Smoke rose from the chimney. Mrs. Miller, the doctor's wife, had come out that morning to start a fire and prepare the house as a favor. "Welcome to Zeller Ranch," Adam said, feeling suddenly self-conscious about the plainness of it all. Theresa's face showed no disappointment, only honest assessment. "It's a proper home," she said, "with good bones. Your father built it." Adam nodded, surprised by her perception. "Mine was an architect," she explained. "He taught me to see the structure beneath the surface." The house was clean but Spartan inside. 4 downstairs rooms, kitchen, parlor, dining room, and Adam's bedroom, and 2 unfinished rooms upstairs. Mrs. Miller had prepared the larger of the upstairs rooms for Theresa, bringing linens and curtains from her own home to make it comfortable. "I'll finish the walls and floors soon," Adam promised as he carried her valise upstairs. "It's been low priority with just me here." Theresa ran her hand along the solid pine beams. "I like seeing the craftsmanship. In Boston, everything is covered with wallpaper and plaster. This feels honest." That evening, they ate a simple meal Mrs. Miller had left. Afterward, Adam showed Theresa the household accounts, a haphazard collection of receipts and figures that made her eyes widen. "This is quite disordered," she said diplomatically. "Never was much for bookkeeping," Adam admitted. "I can help with that. Father insisted I learn household management." A shadow crossed her face. "Though it seems those skills weren't enough to save our home in the end." "Your father's debts weren't your burden to carry," Adam said quietly. She looked up, surprise in her blue eyes. "Most would say a daughter's duty. Most haven't seen what I have out here," he interrupted. "How quickly life can change. How little the rules of society matter when winter comes early or disease strikes a herd." The moment stretched between them, a connection neither had anticipated. "Well," Theresa said finally, gathering the papers, "I shall start organizing these tomorrow." That night, lying in his bed, Adam listened to the unfamiliar sounds of another person moving about his home. Soft footsteps overhead, the creak of floorboards, the gentle closing of a door. For the first time in 3 years, the house didn't feel empty. The thought disturbed him more than he cared to admit. The days fell into a rhythm as spring deepened into summer. Theresa proved herself capable and industrious, transforming the functional but stark house into a home. Curtains appeared at windows, wildflowers in jars on the table, orderly shelves where chaos had reigned. Adam found himself lingering over breakfast, arriving earlier for supper, inventing reasons to be near the house during the day. Theresa's quiet competence impressed him, but it was her resilience that truly caught him by surprise. She approached each challenge, from learning to cook on a wood stove to treating a calf with scours, with determination and eventually success. "You're adapting well," he remarked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains rose and gold. "Most Eastern women find ranch life difficult." "I have little choice but to adapt," she replied. "But truthfully, there's freedom here I never knew in Boston. Everything there was so prescribed: how to speak, dress, think." She smoothed her simpler work dress. "Here, what matters is what works." Adam nodded, understanding perfectly. "That's why I stayed after my parents died. Could have sold up, gone east with what little they left. But out here," he gestured to the expansive view. "A man is measured by his actions, not his background. Or a woman by her father's debts," Theresa added softly. Their eyes met in the fading light, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. The next morning, Theresa found Adam on the porch, his expression grim as he read a letter. "Bad news?" she asked. "Banks calling in loans early. Drought's got everyone selling cattle at once. Prices are falling." He folded the paper carefully. "I'll need to take most of the herd to Billings. Better market there." "How long will you be gone?" 2 weeks, maybe 3. He hesitated. "I've arranged for Mrs. Miller to stay with you. Not proper otherwise." Disappointment flickered across Theresa's face, quickly masked. "Of course. When do you leave?" 3 days. Need to gather the herd first." Adam departed on a clear July morning, leading 37 head of cattle with the help of 2 hired hands. Theresa stood on the porch watching until they disappeared over the distant ridge, surprised by the hollow feeling their absence left. Mrs. Miller arrived that afternoon, a kind but talkative woman in her 50s who seemed determined to fill every silence with conversation. "Known Adam since he was a boy," she said as they prepared supper. "Different then. Used to smile more, before they lost his mother." Theresa's hands stilled on the dough she was kneading. "What happened to her?" "Influenza. Terrible winter, 1875. Half the county sick. His father never really recovered, turned bitter, taught that boy that showing feeling was weakness." Mrs. Miller shook her head. "Shame. Thomas Zeller wasn't always so hard." "Adam rarely speaks of his parents," Theresa observed. "Grief does strange things. Some talk endlessly of those they've lost. Others lock it away." Mrs. Miller gave her a sidelong glance. "Adam's changed since you came. Less guarded." Theresa felt heat rise in her cheeks. "We have a business arrangement. Nothing more." Mrs. Miller's knowing smile said she believed otherwise. 2 weeks stretched to 3 with no word from Adam. Worry gnawed at Theresa as she went about her duties, startling at every distant sound that might herald his return. "Cattle drives take time," Mrs. Miller reassured her. "Adam knows what he's doing." On the 18th day, a rider appeared on the horizon. Theresa rushed to the porch, heart pounding, only to discover it wasn't Adam but a stranger, a weathered man with a deputy's badge. "Mrs. Zeller," he called, dismounting. "Miss Sanders," she corrected. "I'm the housekeeper. Is there news of Mr. Zeller?" The deputy removed his hat. "There was trouble in Billings. Rustlers hit several herds, including Adam's. During the fight, he took a bullet." Theresa's hand flew to her mouth, the world tilting beneath her feet. "He's alive," the deputy added quickly. "Doc patched him up, but he's in no condition to ride. Asked me to bring word, and to tell you he sold what cattle remained at a fair price." "When will he return?" Theresa asked, her voice barely steady. "Few more days. They're bringing him by wagon." After the deputy departed, Theresa stood frozen on the porch, confronted by the realization that her concern went far beyond that of employee for employer. Somehow, in the months since that fateful meeting at the train station, Adam Zeller had become central to her world. The thought terrified her. 5 days later, a wagon rumbled into the yard. Adam sat propped against hay bales, his face pale beneath his tan, a bandage visible beneath his partially buttoned shirt. He winced as the driver helped him down, but his eyes found Theresa immediately. "You're hurt," she said, rushing forward. "I've had worse," he replied, though the tightness around his eyes belied his words. That night, after the driver departed and Mrs. Miller retired to the spare room, Theresa helped Adam into a chair by the fire. His wound, a bullet that had grazed his ribs, was healing, but he moved like a man twice his age. "I thought I might lose everything," he admitted quietly. "Not just cattle, the ranch, my father's legacy." "But you didn't," Theresa reminded him, handing him a cup of coffee laced with medicinal whiskey. "You saved enough to meet the banknote." Adam stared into the fire. "Made me realize something, lying in that doctor's office. If I died, what would it matter that I kept to myself all these years? What legacy is an empty house and a name no one speaks?" Theresa's heart quickened at the raw honesty in his voice. "Your parents would want you to live, Adam, not just survive." It was the first time she had used his given name. He looked up, something vulnerable and questioning in his eyes that made her breath catch. The moment shattered when Mrs. Miller entered with fresh bandages. But something had changed between them, a barrier breached, a possibility acknowledged. As summer waned into autumn, Adam's strength returned, along with a new openness. He spoke more of his parents, of his childhood on the ranch, of dreams deferred. Theresa shared stories of Boston, of her father's brilliance and fatal flaws, of her own shattered expectations. They began taking evening walks along the creek, ostensibly to check fences or livestock, but increasingly just to share the beauty of the land as it prepared for winter. Adam pointed out wildlife, taught Theresa to identify useful plants, listened with genuine interest to her ideas for improving the ranch. "We could add a kitchen garden here," she suggested one evening, indicating a sheltered spot near the house. "With proper planning, we could grow enough vegetables to last through winter." "We?" Adam asked softly. Theresa faltered, suddenly aware of her presumption. "I only meant whoever is here next season." Adam's expression closed like a shutter. "Of course, your position was always temporary." He walked ahead, leaving Theresa to wonder at the sudden distance between them. That night at dinner, a strained silence replaced their usual comfortable conversation. The following week, Reverend Thomas arrived unexpectedly. "Opportunity for you, Miss Sanders," he announced after pleasantries were exchanged. "School board in Helena needs a teacher. Full position, respectable salary. Mentioned your situation to my brother-in-law there." Theresa felt Adam stiffen beside her. "That's very kind," she managed. "Term starts after Christmas. Gives you time to make arrangements." The Reverend beamed, oblivious to the tension. "Proper position for a lady of your background." That evening, Adam retreated to the barn immediately after dinner. Theresa found him there, methodically cleaning tack by lantern light. "You should take the position," he said without looking up. "It's what you've been waiting for. A respectable situation." "Is it?" Theresa asked, voice barely audible over the night sounds of the ranch. Adam set down the bridle he'd been working on. "What else would you want?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken possibilities. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. 6 months ago, security was all I could think about. Now, Adam stood, closing the distance between them. "Theresa, I'm not a sophisticated man. I can't offer the life you had in Boston." "I don't want that life," she said. "I want—" A rider galloped into the yard, interrupting the moment. Adam cursed under his breath and went to investigate, leaving Theresa's words hanging in the air. The rider brought troubling news. A man named James Gordon, the very same who had lured Theresa west with false promises, had been arrested in Denver for similar schemes. Several women had pressed charges, and authorities were seeking others he had defrauded. "They need your testimony," the messenger explained. "In Denver, as soon as possible." Theresa's hands trembled. "That would mean leaving immediately." Adam's expression darkened. "I'll take you." "That's not necessary." "It is." His tone left no room for argument. "I'll arrange everything tomorrow." The journey to Denver took 5 days by train. They traveled in near silence, the conversation from the barn seemingly forgotten in the urgency of their mission. In Denver, they were met by a prosecutor who explained that Gordon had swindled at least 12 women with his false governess scheme. "What happened to the others?" Theresa asked quietly. The prosecutor's grim expression told her enough. "You were fortunate, Miss Sanders." The trial proceeded swiftly. Gordon, a well-dressed man with cold eyes, showed no remorse as Theresa and others testified to his deceptions. When the judge sentenced him to 15 years hard labor, Adam's hand found Theresa's, squeezing gently in silent support. Their hotel in Denver was respectable but modest. Separate rooms, of course, with a shared parlor between. The night after the verdict, Adam knocked on Theresa's door. "Walk with me," he asked. "There's something I need to say." Denver's streets were busy even in the evening, gas lamps casting pools of light on the brick sidewalks. They strolled in silence until they reached a small park. "Seeing that man today," Adam began, "hearing what might have happened to you." He stopped, struggling for words. "If I hadn't been at that station that night." "But you were," Theresa said gently. "By chance. Pure chance." He turned to face her. "I've spent my life believing that isolation was safety, that needing no one meant nothing could hurt me." His eyes met hers, more vulnerable than she'd ever seen them. "I was wrong, Theresa." Her heart quickened. "What are you saying, Adam?" "I'm saying that watching you face that courtroom today was the bravest thing I've ever seen. I'm saying that my house became a home the day you arrived. I'm saying—" He took a deep breath. "I'm saying I love you. And I'm asking if you could consider a more permanent arrangement than housekeeper." Tears welled in Theresa's eyes. "Are you proposing Adam Zeller?" "Poorly," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "But sincerely." Then I accept, she whispered, because I love you too. Their first kiss, beneath the gas lamps of a Denver park, was tentative at first, then deepening with the release of months of unspoken feelings. They were married 3 days later in a small Denver church, with the prosecutor and his wife as witnesses. The train journey home was transformed. No longer employer and employee returning to a business arrangement, but husband and wife beginning a life together. I should finish those upstairs rooms properly now, Adam mused as the Montana landscape began to appear outside their window. Though perhaps not the one you've been using. Theresa blushed, understanding his meaning. I've grown rather fond of that room. The view is lovely. There's a better one from the master bedroom, he said, voice low, of the sunrise over the eastern ridge. When they arrived at Zeller Ranch, it was with new eyes that Theresa viewed what was now her home. No longer a temporary haven, but the foundation of her future. Adam carried her across the threshold, a traditional gesture that made them both laugh with the sheer joy of it. That winter was the harshest in memory, with snow piling against the windows and temperatures that froze the creek solid. Yet inside the Zeller home, warmth prevailed. Adam completed the upstairs rooms, adding proper walls and floors. Theresa sewed curtains and quilts, filling the house with color. They worked side by side during the day and shared the master bedroom at night, learning each other's bodies with the same care they learned each other's hearts. By spring, when the first wildflowers pushed through the melting snow, Theresa had news that made Adam drop the fence post he was carrying. A baby? You're certain? Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday, she said, her hands protectively covering her still flat stomach. By Christmas, there will be 3 of us. Adam whooped with joy, lifting her in a gentle embrace. My father always said a man stands alone in this world, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But he was wrong, Theresa. So wrong. We're never truly alone, she agreed, touching his face. Not when we have the courage to open our hearts. In October of 1886, Theresa gave birth to a healthy daughter they named Elizabeth, after Adam's mother. As they sat together before the fire that Christmas Eve, their child sleeping peacefully between them, Adam reflected on the journey that had brought them here. If I hadn't gone to town that day, he mused. If I hadn't heard you crying at that train station. Perhaps it wasn't chance, Theresa suggested, her hand finding his. Perhaps some stories are meant to be written, no matter how unlikely they seem. Outside, snow fell gently on the ranch that was no longer just Adam's father's legacy, but the foundation of a new one, built not on isolation, but on the love that had transformed 2 lost souls into a family. I have nowhere to go, she had whispered that fateful evening. You're home now, he answered, not just to the memory, but to the woman who had changed everything. We both are,